Hello, good evening. Welcome to Chassidus at K. If you would please give me any high sign that you're hearing me, that would be very much appreciated. Anybody who's there, just let me know that, that you can hear me. That would be wonderful. Are we okay? I see people, but no one's letting me know. Can you hear me? Okay, good. So let's start. This is a continuation of what we started last week. A long sikha from the Rebbe from Tavshim Mem Zayin, 1987, in which the Rebbe really bore down, I think is the right word, on a somewhat new topic. The topic, well, I say somewhat because he had spoken about it many times before, but really bore down and brought it to front and center, the topic being the responsibility and the need for us Jewish people to help the world to come to the state that Hashem has promised and really announced at the outset, which it says in Hebrew, L'Sheves Yitzora, that the planet Earth and all of the creation was created, L'Sheves Yitzora. It was formed in order to create settledness, peacefulness, harmony. And last week we learned that one of the first things that the Rebbe does in the Sikha is he asks and answers the question, why now? First he gives us a little background. Any of you who are learning the Rambam, either 1 or 3 Parakim a day, know that we've been learning Hilchos Malachim, and in Hilchos Malachim, amongst other things, the Rambam discusses the importance of the Sheva Mitzvahs in the context of a Yufas Toar, someone who's a woman who's captured in battle, and certain behaviors that are incumbent upon Jews, particularly Jewish men, with that woman. And one of them is to give the woman an opportunity to become a ger, and if not, she's responsible to become, it's called a ger. The first one is a ger tzedek, that's a convert to Judaism, and the other is a ger toshuv, which is someone who observes the Sheva Mitzvahs. And the Rambam speaks about the criticality of all the nations of the world observing the Sheva Mitzvahs, and it has the same criticality as we Jews observing our 613. The Rebbe in this Sikha explains why, because the Sheva Mitzvahs are given from God to Moshe and they're part of the Torah. And Rambam makes it very, very clear that Adam Harishon, the very first human being, was given 6 of the 7 mitzvahs we call the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, all of which, all included except Ever Minachai, to eat or take and rip from a living animal. So Adam is obligated, every human from Adam is obligated, and then those as the chain of descent goes down from low and low generations, 10 generations that we have Noach, and Noach was given the 7th of the Sheva Mitzvahs, which was Ever Minachai, and those mitzvahs are incumbent upon all humanity, and the next split in the path, so to speak, was at the time of Avram. And Avram was given first the covenant of the circumcision, and Avram, of course, begins the split in the road, which splits the Jews in terms of our obligations from the rest of the world. But in that sikha that we learned last week, the Rebbe clearly delineates and made it clear that there are 2 reasons why he's talking about this. One, because it's in our Torah, it's something given, as I said earlier, from God to Moses at Har Sinai. And secondly, and the most important thing that answers the question why now, because the Rebbe says the time is right. The nations of the world are ready for this. And he uses the example of, particularly here in American modern times, where there's very little resistance to the notion of doing things which will heal and which will bring things together. And this is basically the context, as I said, the root of the Sheva Mitzvahs is L'Sheves Yotzar, that the earth, the planet, all of the cosmos was formed for the purpose of being settled and in peace and harmony. So that pretty much brings us to where we are tonight. And in this Sikha, I've distributed the text, and I've marked up the text so that you can hopefully follow the flow that I'm going to start with. So I'm starting with Ois Tes Vav. V'hine Naisif al ha'omer le'il. The Rebbe writes that in addition to everything which he said above, of which I just gave a summary of a summary, in addition to everything else, where he spoke about that the interferences that existed in previous times, which prevented us from being openly, even discussing, but certainly openly pushing and promoting, I guess that's a better word, the Sheva Mitzvahs, was because in former times we'd be killed by the Romans, by the Inquisition, etc., etc. But he said, in addition to this, that there are no restrictions now. We're living in a time when it's perfectly fine. The Yomis Oilam, that it's a time when it's acceptable. There won't be any interference, the Rebbe says, to have influenced the 7 nations, the Kaya mitzvahs b'nei Noach, to fulfill their mitzvahs. So tzorich lahasik b'zeh b'poel b'chol ha'toifef. As a result of that, we have to do everything we can, the Rebbe says, b'toikef, with a strength. Not enough to know that this is what the world is meant to be brought to, but to be active agents, b'toikef, with using in a strong way in bringing it about. And again, this is 1987, 33 years ago. But he says, in addition to what we just said, there's something else what needs to be added. This service, this work, avoida, that he's talking to us, have to do. He's talking to us in the same way that when he's speaking, this Sikha, by the way, weaves in a lot of congruence between his call for Mashiach now and his call for Sheva Mitzvahs now. And just as he said to us in the later moments before Gimel Tammuz, he said, I've done everything I can to bring Mashiach, and now it's up to each and every one of us to do everything we can. That language is echoed right here in the Sheva Mitzvahs, that we have to do it b'toichef, with his strength. And this service has to be done in such a way, shepoil shini ba'olam, that it affects change in the world. And just to recap, because this is only the second we've been doing it. The reason I started this because events that have occurred in the last short number of months, from COVID to fires in the streets, these are very strange and seize the day kind of opportunities. There's a moment of convulsion. I think that's a good word in our culture. A moment of convulsion, and that convulsion can be seized as an opportunity for healing. And the Rebbe is saying that the way we have to step up to this in such a way that shepoil shini ba'olam, that our stepping up to it affects change in the world. And speaking of this, shini l'toiv, of course, it has to be a change for the good. Which means to say, even though the world is the same word as concealment, ayin lamed mem, which means there's concealments in the world and godliness is not revealed. The Rebbe says in relation to this, it's the hiddenness is so great that in two ways, the non-Jewish people of the world feel there's something lacking, there's something, and they feel a yearning for the something. This may express itself in ways and in actions on the street of recent that we don't particularly care for, but that's an expression of the yearning for change. I shared with some other people, and maybe I didn't said this last week, but I like it so much I'll repeat it in case, and hopefully you like it too. I did some construction work with a partner who was a Caribbean guy. Lives his home is in Jamaica, and he actually retired there. And during this time where everybody's zooming, he sent me some African proverb. The African proverb is, "A child who's not embraced by the village will burn it down just to feel its warmth." So there's a fire in all of humanity to feel the warmth of community, which ultimately, of course, is represented by all of us coming together, as our founders said, and this may not politically be popular, one nation under God. And it's just a very simple thing. The Rebbe will say this openly later. The critical piece that's missing, and he's going to talk about education. The critical piece that's missing in education is the draining of God's presence from it. We become masters of technology, and we become poverty-stricken when it becomes knowledge of spirituality and wholeness and what human beings internally in order to be full, realized human beings. So he says, no, it has to be. So to repeat, in regard to the concealment of the world, the situation is such, to such a thing that even though they may feel it only from a distance. This is mazlaya chazia. It's an expression, even though you don't see it, your mazel sees it. And that's what gives the little touch of anxiety, the little touch of, is this the way we were meant to live? The little touch of existential angst. Because the mazel sees what's supposed to be, and we just feel that there's something missing. So he says the world is ready. He says about Mashiach, the world is ready. The non-Jews are ready to fulfill the mitzvahs of the Noach. Makablim es misha medarbe imohim, and to receive, this is an interesting point, and to receive anybody who speaks about them, b'sev apanim yafis, with a smile and a greeting, u'mesayim le, and even to help them. Now, I was in a discussion the other night with a fellow named Levi Jacobson. I don't know if he's on the call, but he's very active in speaking to people individually, non-Jewish people, about the Sheva Mitzvahs. And he says his experience in general is that they're waiting for Jewish people to tell us what we know, because they know that we know what God has intended for the world. And every encounter, he says, that he's had has been received with tremendous gratitude, and even to the extent of what the Rebbe just said, how can I help you with this? So if that kind of seed can be sown and create individual plants, how much more could be sown, seeded and sown, if we took the Rebbe's haroah, his teaching, seriously, and said that each and every one of us, just as each and every one of us, it's incumbent upon us to do everything we can to bring Mashiach. Each and every one of us, it's incumbent upon to act b'teichef to bring the world to this level of its own destiny, which is what I've called the Shia, right? And the Rebbe's teachings are bringing the world to its destiny. And when there is visibly, when the world is visibly showing its change for the good, until the change is actually recognizable, the Shivim Umas, to the 70 nations, movement will be understood, and how much more so, how much more so that the Jewish people, we people, will be lifted up. If we're perceived not only as part of the solution, but bringing the solution. And he's going to speak about, and we spoke about last week, how we have to really bring ourselves out of ourselves. The Rambam's rule is lichayf, to force ourselves and to exert extra strength to force, but not in a negative way. It says, B'darkei shalom, force in a positive way, the whole world to this. And how much more so will the non-Jews then not only respect us, but actually be on board with us. That's what the Rebbe is saying here. I mean, why did I say that? Because there's a scoffers mentality within me, as there may be in people out there. Anti-Semitism has been the habit of the relationship between non-Jews and Jews forever. And in the last month, and in the months before, remember last summer, God forbid, with all the attacks on the shuls, it's very much in our time. But the Rebbe is saying, we have a key to change that. And the key is to tell the world what it really wants to hear and really needs to hear, even though it's behaving in a way that looks very fomenting with anger. As I said that proverb, the anger is just an expression of wanting to be part of the warmth of the community of humanity. And even though this is an expression from the Gemara, Akshidora means is the generation kosher, Akshidora, meaning even though there has been Yeridas Hadoros, the tzaddikim of yore, the consciousness, let's say, that Avram Avinu had is not the same in any respect to the consciousness that occurred to the Chachamim of the time of the Mishnah, much more contracted. So there's a notion of Yeridas Hadoros, that the generations have contracted. However, it's explained in many books of Musar, and particularly emphasized in Chassidus. The Torah brings a couple places in Chassidus. That even though the generations have descended, let's say in terms of direct connection with spiritual forces that enable us to manipulate or have in the schus of which we can have things happen, like Hani and Abel who would pray and rain would come, etc., etc. But he said, the Rebbe is saying, in other respects, we actually have an advantage over those earlier generations. And particularly, particularly to our ability to give ourselves over to things that are beyond our understanding. Mesiras Nefesh. The Kabbalah's Oil Malchus Shemayim, and taking upon ourselves the yoke, literally the yoke of heaven. Like an animal takes on the yoke and now conforms to the will of the rider, of the director, and carries the wagon. So the Rebbe says that in these later generations, this is a facet of Jewish character that's even more expressed now than it was in earlier days when there was much more understanding. So here we have the ability to take upon ourselves things we don't understand only because we know that God said it and he gave it to Moshe, and Moshe gave it to the Zakanim, and the Zakanim gave it to all the Rebbeim until our Rebbe, the Rebbe Menachem Mendel, and all of the halachas that have descended from there on down. So we have the ability to just grab it without a lot of questioning. So we have that Maila, that advantage of Mesiras Nefesh. To such an extent that Mesiras Nefesh al Moshe shehoyu inin mikol adam mikol adam, to such an extent that when it comes to the Mesiras Nefesh of Moshe Rabbeinu had this characteristic. This is what made him chosen by God to be the leader, because he was humble. Yeah, and he was the humblest, most humble of all people, on the face of the earth. And Mavar Admin Hazokin, the Alter Rebbe writes, that even in relation to the humility that Moshe Rabbeinu has, the main and exemplary, lowness and openness and humility is in relation to the latter generations. So the Frat Hador the Alter Rebbe writes, and particularly in the generation of the heels of Mashiach. Asher limrois kol hasimonim v'hashinuyim shabai, which in spite of all the changes that we've gone through, shalei lamiluta, which have not necessarily been so great, as explained in other places, but kol zen, nevertheless, oiskim b'torah u'mitzvahs. I mean, think about this. What we've been through, and we still grab on and hold on, not only still, but in a grander, more numbers now than there were in generations right after that big event in the 1940s, 39s and 40s. We've, through the schus, of course, of many, many Gedolim and many, many special Yidden, our numbers have grown, not decreased. We've begun to thrive in every way, in secular culture as well as in spiritual culture, in ways that we hadn't had even before, through our complete given overness, Mesiras Nefesh, to the righteousness and the correctness of the Torah, even though we don't have the brains that previous generations had. And nevertheless, because we're Isaac, we're occupied in them. The Kabbalah soil, Malchus Shemayim, through our Kabbalah soil. And since there's been such a good turn, remember in earlier and even later, Maimonides and Sifas, the Rebbe always called America a kingdom of what was it? Mamlechus. Somebody help me. Yeah, I'm going to say righteousness now, but I think it's peace. In other words, the idea being, and maybe someone can help me with the exact words, and America is one of the places, maybe the first place we've lived in where it wasn't against the law, and it wasn't fighting, and it wasn't pushing against us. We can observe, and we can be comfortable observing. So the Rebbe says, because of that shinui, that difference in the world that we live in, and that's for good. There's a change in us, in that we have become more dedicated. The numbers of us have grown, and again earlier, largely through the efforts of Chabad in particular, but many Gedolim and Chevra, as they say, Chevra Ahavas efforts. Yiddishkeit has grown, as opposed to dwindled. And it's grown through a selfless devotion and sense, even though we don't understand it, as the earlier generations have, a sense of the righteousness and the rightness and the correctness of it. So that change is also occurring. The nations of the world, as he said earlier last week and a little bit tonight, are much more receptive. As I mentioned the experience of that fellow whom I mentioned earlier, in his one-on-one experiences speaking about Sheva Mitzvahs, that the non-Jews are grateful to hear about it, and are grateful that a Jew is finally sharing the wisdom that belongs to the world with everybody. I'm just paraphrasing the words that this person told me earlier in the week about his experience with Sheva Mitzvahs. And I'm doing it because this is what the Rebbe is saying in 1987. The world is ready, receptive, it's open for us to do it, and it's incumbent upon us to do it with a taikif in the same way, because in this Sikha he mixes what we have to do for Mashiach as well, in the same way that it's incumbent upon us to do everything we can. Now, this phrase, everything we can, I'd like to just shed, for me, there was a little bit of light on it. I shared it earlier in the week with some people. A quote that I saw actually in English from Chaim Miller's biography about the Rebbe, Turning Judaism Outward, where the Rebbe used the metaphor of a stone as it ripples in a pool. And this is something that's very critical. In order to be a shliach, you have to have the mishalech. You have to have within you something, at least the core of the essence of what the sender wants. So we broaden this. The sender is God. He sent us down here, l'sheves yitzorah, to bring the world to its destiny, which is that it should l'sheves. It was formed, yitzorah, it was formed to be peaceful. And he gave us the capability to do it by investing Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, His very essence within us through our adhesion to the Torah. And the Rebbe says each one of us have to take that and drop ourselves into the pool. And from that pool, ripples will occur, and each those ripples are empowerments of other people who will empower other people. So when he says it's up to us, he wasn't kidding. In fact, later in this Sikha, he'll speak about how the Gemara, from the time of the Gemara says, Kol Akitzim, all the times are over. And in many generations, from Mashiach. But he says, what is missing? It isn't the learning in yeshiva. It isn't the keeping kosher, all of which is essential, don't get me wrong, essential, but that it's that each one of us, that it is up to us, each one of us, to change the world, to go out into the world and change it in whatever ways. And you can wake up tomorrow and find 10 ways, I guarantee you. Even if you're stay-at-home with quarantine, you can find ways. Thank God there's technology. You can find ways with your children. You can find ways with your family to manifest the holiness and the yesheves, the settledness for which the world is created, and let that ripple through all of your relationships, your friend relationships, your family relationships, your work relationships, etc. So since we, and he's saying, since we will take upon ourselves to change like this and to behave like this, we will find that if we go out there like this, that the nations are ready, that there's a shinui amongst the change amongst the Umas Oilam. So the Rebbe says, from this is understood, that it's incumbent, how much more it is incumbent upon us to take this, to do this now, as is known from the, he says, Metoras Baal Shem Tov, from the Torah Baal Shem Tov, Vayidua, Shemikol, into page 619. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Naisen Loch Zman La'asek B'Kol Shad Inyanim. He's given us things to do, that time that we can occupy ourselves with every other thing. Halachas Kamen L'Kamen, how much more so, Shinukol Zman La'asek B'Hatzolis Yeled Arkim Yisrael. And here he's speaking now about doing the same thing with Jewish children. Jewish children, when it comes, and this is it's a side issue in the Sikha, but it's something we'll just touch on it, and then we'll go to the next piece. This that he's talking about it's very interesting to me. He's got two topics about which there are parallels: Gili HaMashiach, up to us; Sheva Mitzvahs, up to us. World is ready for Mashiach. The world is ready for Sheva Mitzvahs, and he says, even in our and therefore the process of education needs to change on a global scale. He'll talk about later public school education changing, and in this very short thing, which I'm just going to say outside, he speaks about Jewish education changing. That we're educating our children very well in the Gemara, and we're educating our children very well in Shulchan Aruch. But are we educating our children very well in Hashem Echad, in what it means to that there is one God, and what our responsibility is to not only to ourselves and to the Jewish people, but to the human race? And in a nutshell, are we raising themselves to be spiritually enlightened? And I had many friends who went to yeshiva and would answer this question: no, that's not what we learned in yeshiva. And the Rebbe calls for it as a change in the way chinuch is presented, even in yeshivas. And then gets back to the mainstream here, which is on page 619, opening the next bracket. And since the opportunity is there, the time is ripe to be mashpia, to have an effect on the non-Jews, that they should lekayim zayin mitzvahs b'nei nayach, that they should fulfill these mitzvahs. So since that's the case, moving is understood, that this will make a change for the better in the whole status of the world. And it will also make a change in the Jewish people. He's reiterating, but in the reiteration is emphasizing that our engagement with the non-Jews to teach them that there is a God in heaven who has proclaimed for all of humanity that these are the things that all humanity needs to do, l'shavas yitzorah, so that the world can reveal that it was formed for settledness and peacefulness. That will not only elevate them, but in doing so, what it says, a rising tide lifts all boats. You know the expression? So this is a very interesting way of looking at things. As they rise up, we will rise up as well. And our relationship to them, of course, will be a very different relationship than the relationship we have right now. Le malyuto, on the positive side. Excuse me. Yeah. The Habir Bizah, the Rebbe says, this is the paragraph under the bracket that I gave you. Habir Bizah, the explanation is even behaktim bir klalis inyan dematzev be'olam lifnei haga'ula. To understand this, now he's going to step way back and give us a perspective. Let's understand what the situation is in the world right before the Geula. Now, Ubahagdoma. And to understand that, let's have a preface. A Gemara, at the time of the writing of the Gemara, Kova, it established the following saying: Shekolu kol hakitzim ve'ein hadova tolu ela b'tshuva. All the prophesized times for the redemption have been done, are over, and it only depends on Shuva. It's a quote from the Gemara. Lachar bor Rashi, and afterwards comes Rashi, Taisvis, Apoiskim, the ones who wrote the Shulchan Aruch, Rishonim v'Achoreinim, the later generations of Talmidei Chachamim, Ad l'Achorein Acharayim, until the later Acharayim, V'b'meshech hadoros kulam, and then throughout all these generations, Lamdu inyan zeh, they learned this same idea, Kifi shehu b'Gemara, as it's expressed in the Gemara, and in the Rambam, B'poiskim v'ad l'Achorein Acharayim, until the later of the laters. They've all learned. I mean, think about this. This from the time of the Gemara till now, how many? A good almost 2,000 years. Maybe even a little less or more. Imagine the same thing, learning the same thing over and over again, all the times it ended, and asking yourself. And it all depends on Shuva. The answer was given, and it still hasn't happened. Right? So this is the background that he's laying. Amna. However, even that this was brought to the surface was not all the time. People were busy learning the Gemara and learning Paiskim and learning how to paskin halacha, and busy doing what the halacha l'maisa is. And only from time to time did this saying from the Gemara come up again. And it came and it came down to the generation of the Frierdiker Rebbe, of course, whose we just had the Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz, the liberation and the birthday of the Frierdiker Rebbe, who the Rebbe always calls Nasi Doreinu. You know, it's a very interesting thing in itself when the Rebbe has to refer to who's the Rebbe of the generation. He refers to his father-in-law. So the Frierdiker Rebbe announced this same language, but you'll see with a different spin. Behichris besturmen, and he announced it with a storm. And in his expression, the Frierdiker Rebbe's expression was this: La'alta l'shuva, la'alta l'geula. The quicker we go to shuva, the quicker we go to geula, which is really just the way of expressing what the Gemara said. Right? All the kitzim are over, and the only thing that's missing is shuva. So the Frierdiker Rebbe said, "Yeah, now, the time is now. The quicker we get to that, the quicker there'll be the geula." Many kinds of writings and many kinds of hakarozos were announced with a storm. Even though, and in spite of all the difficulties that were involved. I mean, publishing Sforim in Soviet Russia, etc., was not a very easy thing to do, right? And there was no interruption when he was doing. And the difficulties that were in front of him were even greater than the normal. Nevertheless, the he continued to continually bring out and to publicize this announcement, the tzivua, and this commandment. The sooner we do shuvah, the sooner we go to it. It was a tzivua, it was a command, really an announcement. Well, hafsida, and to bring it to print, and to spread it out and publish it. Yishar and he wanted it published in books so that the generations after him could see it and see what the marching orders are. And this was then printed and came out in books even now. And we had to bring these things out in edition after edition. And we'll skip over to the next page. Yeah. And these things this is page 620. And many people picked up on the announcement of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and uttered that this is something that the Frierdiker Rebbe is not creating a novelty; he's just creating an emphasis. Now, for those who were in the class last week, the Rebbe said the same thing about the Sheva Mitzvahs. I said the Sikha weaves in Geula and Sheva Mitzvahs. That he said that this is not a new thing. It was something that the Rambam, of course, made it very clear in the halachas that we're learning. Those of us who are learning Rambam in Hilchos Malachim, that Sheva Mitzvahs in the autumn was given from Moshe to Moshe from Har Sinai by Hashem, not a new thing, and this is also not a new thing, but for various reasons, which we talked a lot about this evening, about why the Sheva Mitzvahs particularly is the right time. At least resistance, but that applies also to Mashiach. I mean, they're so intertwined. I mean, the purpose of the Sheva Mitzvahs is to bring all of humanity to the realization and the behaviors that God wants from the world so that the world can fulfill its destiny, which is the title of our class, Bringing the World to Its Destiny. Mashiach is also bringing the world to its destiny, as the Rambam himself says, that the destiny of the world, that the world will be covered with the knowledge of God like waters covers the sea. So there's a intertwining and an interrelationship between the objectives of Sheva Mitzvahs and the objectives of Mashiach, as well as all the predecessor social situations out of which they rise. So we'll go to the 620, the fourth line. So the idea of the end of days, the kitzim, the kates, has been expressed in many, many, many books, beginning with Rav Saadia Gaon, which is in the 900s of the Common Era. Remember we described the descent from Moshe Rabbeinu. We didn't say the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, the Tzikanim, but we did the Chachamim, and we went down to the Rishonim and the Achrayim. The Saadia Gaon was part of the Shlav, the level of Torah scholars which are called the Geonim. In English it's genius, but it's not a very good translation. And that was in the 900s. So he cites the Saadia Gaon and also the Rambam, and also a sefer called Megillah HaMegillos, which I don't know who. The names mentions in the footnote who the author is, but I'm not familiar with it all. And even more. And then the Alter Rebbe, of course, picked it up and emphasized it. And he made a big storm about this. And we have not stopped. We've never closed our heart. We've never stopped up our hearts and closed our mouths to speak about this in all the sichos in our generation. Skipping the parentheses. There are kitzim, ends of days, which are spoken about by the Rebbe Neshav, and he brings the Frierdiker Rebbe, and of course he doesn't mention himself, but here we are. If so, royim shemoz shekolu kolakisim. So we understand, we see, from that which all the ends of days have come, the time of Mashiach has come. We see it from the time of the Gemara. Over Shonim Rabbis, many years have passed. Ad Shebeshonim Tofer Samivov, which is the time of the Rabbi Rashav. Yeah, he called a particular year, a very specific year. It would be a Kates, a time appropriate for the Hisgalus and Mashiach. However, the Rebbe says Nisha, the Indian is Nisha, remains Rak Etzel Elo Shehishtatfu Behizvadus. It remains to those who are here meaning in the Farbringen, that have gathered together, combined in partnership in the Farbringens. Or those who by some circumstance have come across these old sichas. Excuse me, I made a mistake. When he was talking about those who were gathered in his vadis, he was talking about those gathered in his vadis Farbringens by the Rebbe Rashav. Or were fortunate enough to see a publication of the Rebbe Rashav, until came his son, the son of the Rebbe Rashav, Mordechai Mother Frierdiker Rebbe, and he began to speak about this with a big storm. Uka'omer, as we said. So the emphasis is this: Hadgasha al hapursum with the fustaf, the publicizing it, v'hu atzmoi, and this has to be done in a gila es pisgam the tzemat tzedek she'inin nitfas. Also, who the Tzemach Tzedek also write for the generations, and this has to be done with a kavanah, that this things has to be done in order to have an effect in the world. So the Rebbe ends this section. He says, "Umazeh moving from this is understood. Shechol hakitzim shenemenu b'chol haderes, all the ends of days which have been spoken about for in all the generations, hachal mizman Gemara, until from the time of the Gemara." Until the storm that the Frierdiker Rebbe gave. Le'nemlu l'shaitum bilvad was not just for their times. It had to be and was understood that it should be drawn and even made stronger in each of the other future generations. Ve'im kein, the Rebbe says, this chazek is oid yoser. It has to be done since it hasn't happened. And the emphasis was each and every generation should bring it out stronger. So what's missing? What's missing is we're not doing it strong enough. So with this whole thing about the Ketzim, the Rebbe has made us know that this idea, number one, is not a new idea. It's an idea that has been emphasized throughout all the history of the Torah. And the fact that it doesn't happen yet, we speak about Mashiach particularly now, but applicable to the Sheva Mitzvahs as well, as we'll see, is only an indication that we haven't been strong on it. And look back at our history, we haven't. How many Gedolim, how many Kehilas have made it their business to make either we are going to bring Mashiach now because Kol HaKitzim, or we are going to bring to the world Sheva Mitzvahs because that's our responsibility from God to Adam, from Adam to Noach, from Noach to Abraham, from Abraham to Moshe, from Moshe to us. It hasn't happened. And the Rebbe has, in the previous part of our Sikha, described how this particular time is just so ripe for it, both from two perspectives. It's so in need of it. I mean, the world is in a state of convulsion. I use that word earlier, cataclysm. Now, what is going to be? Who is going to save us? Well, we know who's going to save us. Mashiach is going to save us, and the purveyors of the product, which is the information about how to bring the world into the state of Mashiach, is in our hands. Jews, nobody else knows this. This is Jewish knowledge, and so the Rebbe says everything is ready for this. Everything is right for this, and we're missing the boat. This is my own words, but this is essentially the feel of what he's saying. We don't want to look back and say, Kol HaKitzim. Hey, remember? From the time of the Gemara, and we missed it again. Come on. The Rebbe is saying, get it together, but toikef, with a strength. It's up to each and every one of us to say ad mosai. The Ikar HaShayla, and the main question is, Kivin shemendura odis kate shenema al yedei nasi dorenu. Since we've spoken about the Kates, the time that the Frierdiker Rebbe had made this very clear, shehabir hayochid shematzosi hu, that his explanation is the explanation of the Nasi Hador, sheshmaito ha'inyan over mehanasi hu hakol. This is a Rashi, by the way, Rashi in Pashas Chukos, which is only, 2 weeks ago? A couple of weeks ago. Rashi in Pashas Chukos, that the Nasi is a call. The Nasi is everything. He encapsulates everything of that generation. V'hainu, l'chol echad ve'echad Yisroel is incumbent upon all of us to do it. What time is it? So let's go a little further. Where did I mark it? So this. Okay, page 621. Page 621, there's a mark. So he says, in our case, according to the Alpi Hamavur La'il, for those of you looking, it's like in the middle of the page. According to what we explained above, Be'erucha at length, it's understood, moving. Psagdin Harambam, that the Psagdin, what the Rambam called, this is the halacha, we explained above, is Negea L'chol Echad Ve'echad Mamish, applies to each and every individual. V'gam im arato hoya efshel etzesi dechavase belimid halacha bilvad. And here he speaks, saying to those of us who fancy ourselves people of learning, yeshivadik kind of people, he says, and even until now, you may have thought that it's possible to fulfill your obligation by learning the halachas. You know, lefi mahalacha olam be'esi yesh loshu v'lilmud es halacha. Right? We should, in other words, we could, let's say, great idea. Let's have everybody learn the halachas. And by the way, you should know the halachas. I mean, it's a drush that we say every day in davening. Al tikr halichas el halachas. It says halichas olam boy. The goings of the world belong to Hashem, and the drush is don't read goings halachas. The world goes according to halacha. So you have to halacha halicha, going law. You have to do that. But we can't be satisfied with it. You can't be satisfied with it. So limed b'shturan hachigad, learning in a great way. We have to learn in a very great way. Limed hamevi l'demasa, until the learning brings to deed. Again, not enough to learn, not enough to know, and we're no strangers to the Rebbe's call and the Chachamim's call and the Gedolim Hamaisa who are in the Torah's call Hamaisa who are Iker. So let's get with it. Let's get to the Maisa. Let's learn, which we're doing somewhat tonight, and hopefully we'll do more. What have our Rebbeim told us we need to know in order to bring to Maisa the Sheva Mitzvahs, Geula, and the Sheva Maisas. So let's limit Mevela de Maisa. Maisa echad sheyovi she'oiseh v'hatzolah la'olam. Because in one deed, as the Rambam says, with one deed you can tip the world to the world of Yeshua, the world of salvation. But you don't know what that one deed is. So everybody has to do their deed. I can't wait for Reuven to do it, because maybe that's not the deed. Even after the period has passed in which the Frierdiker Rebbe announced this, who was the Nasi of that generation, and there's nobody around who really has the ability to calculate, the deeds, the exact moments of the case. We don't know, as I just said earlier, what will be that deed which will bring the salvation. Also, there are many years have passed, many generations have passed. Excuse me, I'm repeating that paragraph. V'gam in kiyam ha'halacha, and even if we fulfill the halacha, yehi ba'ofen kazeh, in such a way, sheyaseh ma'aseh echad, that we do a deed, and we do it. Let's say we do the deed. We want to popularize the notion of Mashiach, and we're doing it. Why is, let's say, a hypothetical Shmuel? Why is he doing it? He's doing it because he's the kind of a person that likes to influence people, and there's a shtickle of his own self that's involved in it. Because, and hopefully we can find people like that, and there are people like that. But he's not doing it ultimately l'shma. He's doing it because he likes to influence people, he likes to teach people, he likes to influence people. So we know that Ma'aseh Echad, even if you do a Ma'aseh Shalei L'Shma, and it's not for 100% the reason that you're doing it for God's sake, but you've got some of your own self involved. Elamas Lahavi Yeshuva Hatzolul Oilam, and he's doing it on a condition. Harikavah Psak Admar Zok, and the Alter Rebbe is already paskin b'halacha, and this is a popular way of saying that Metaik Shaboy L'Shma, this is actually rooted not in the Alter Rebbe, but earlier, Metaik Shaboy L'Shma, Bo L'Shma, that an action that's not L'Shma, that's not for the sake of heaven, eventually will come for the sake of heaven. So the Rebbe is saying, you listen tonight to my Sikha. You weren't there when I first said it, and you're getting a little bit interested in this, to the point not only that you want to learn more about what are the halachas around Sheva Mitzvahs and what are the approaches, but you really want to get involved. So don't worry about having any ulterior motives for that, because Shematay Shaloi L'Shmo. The Torah of Chassidus Mesifa, and the Torah of Chassidus, meaning the learning of Chassidus, the teachings of Chabad particularly, Umaveres, that it says Mitaych Shaloi L'Shmo, from without Mitaych always means Hainu Shiahaya L'Shmo Hu Hatoych the Shaloi L'Shmo. I'll translate it. It's very subtle, but it says Mitaych, from within that which is not L'Shmo, it will come to L'Shmo. So the Rebbe tells us that Metoich, that which wasn't for L'Shmo, has a seed within it. The very seed is there to bring forth the L'Shmo. So in other words, in very simple words, if you're a performer and you perform for mixed reasons, you like being on the stage, you like the applause, and you also are singing things which are meaningful. So don't worry about those secondary things. The fact that it's a little bit, maybe even a lot about you and your performance. I'm just using this as an example. You can be anything. You can be a head of a corporation, right? And there are many reasons you're doing it, including, of course, many reasons for yourself to aggrandize your own wealth. But you happen to be the head of a company that's bringing clean energy to Africa. So there's a certain lishma in there, because you're helping other people. It's not about you, it's about the others. So don't worry about the ego that's present, because within, he said, because that ego, not only don't worry about it, but within that ego is the seed. In the lishma is the seed of something will come to lishma. And I think I have one more piece that I'd like to do. Let's see. I'm just thinking here. Okay, we're going to do a small piece on page 622. I marked it with brackets. V'zehu gam hatam. It's about halfway down the page. V'zehu gam hatam l'dibur oides zayin mitzvahs b'nei noach. So in this little piece that we've been doing for probably the last 20 minutes, he's been speaking about Mashiach. Time is right for Mashiach. Do everything we can. I'm saying that I don't mean to be saying it the way I'm saying it. Do everything you can. B'chizuk, b'taikef. because that's the only thing that's missing from making it happen. Each one of us making a firm decision to say, think deep. What can I do tomorrow to bring Mashiach? What can I do in the next few moments tomorrow to bring the world with Chevra Ahavas Yisroel, to realize that it was formed to be settled through the teachings of the 7 mitzvahs. This that we've been saying is also the reason for speaking so much concerning the 7 mitzvahs, particularly in these later days. Yeah, that with the imishum bittul haskona bilvad. If it were just for the fact that there was no danger, that's creates a stage that you can walk out to, but that doesn't mean the audience is going to digest and change themselves because you walked out on an appropriate stage. The stage is set, but that's not the only reason. And this has changed through many, many years, that in addition to the change of the stage being set, we have been encouraged in the Sikha and for generations of our Rebbeim that it is up to us. We've been told the Shluchim, they're an embodiment of that. But the Rebbe, when he turned and said, it's up to us, he meant all of us must be Shluchim. Don't rely on the Shluchim to bring Yiddishkeit to Yidden. Don't rely on anyone else but yourself to bring Yiddishkeit to yourself and to others. And don't rely on anyone else but yourself to bring the Sheva Mitzvahs to all of humanity. Bias Mashiach Zirkena Kashura, the coming of Mashiach is tied in together with Kamuvim B'Shini Amatzav Oilam. Also has to do with the change in the world, right? The stage is set, the message is able to be received, and the only thing missing is the third point: we have to become the messengers. So it's both of these, both Sheva Mitzvahs and Mashiach are in the same boat, so to speak, and they both involve the Shini Matzav Oilam. And since we see that there's been a change in the world, and nevertheless, Mashiach hasn't come, this itself proves, demonstrates, and should give strength to everything we said above. That we must exercise strength and alacrity. These are English words for zrizus. And we have to make this on an individual level. Shall call each and every person. And there's also we should arouse the great relevance of the topic. It should be spoken about in every gathering of all Jews together. Yisroel. Many people should gather together and should speak about it and arouse each other with it, which I'm hoping that there are many Rabbim, at least 2 or 3. That's how, on Facebook you don't really see how many there are. But again, that's the purpose of why we're doing this particular topic, to bring as people in, as many as we can, to the urgency and the timeliness of doing this. And Sofis Maisa Echad Adidei Kolachem Be'echad Michem. There should be a gathering, everybody together. Ubeprat Adidei Shleishi Yehudim B'Yachad. At least 3 people together should come together and make hachlotas to do something that will bring Mashiach and will bring Sheva Mitzvahs to the world. And if people will do that, the deed will happen. Shehu Hamaka Hapatish, which is in the Gemara, the finishing touches will be done, and it will be right at the moment, Lifnei Hagaula Hamitis Vashlema, before the complete redemption. So we'll wind up here. And I don't think there's anything I can say. The Rebbe has said it all. I'm looking now at the screen to see any questions. An excellent question. Last, shouldn't our mindset be not what can I do tomorrow, but what can I do today? And you know, as I was saying tomorrow, I was thinking inside my head, why am I saying tomorrow? There's still, before we go to sleep, right? Many hours left in today. Of course it should be today, right? When the Baal Shem Tov went to the chamber of Mashiach and he asked Mashiach, when will he come? He said, Hayoim, today. So everybody has to live in the today. By the way, the finishing that, so you asked the question, and I don't know if it was a Tana, someone can help me, Amaroya, who said who went to the, I forget who it was, who went to the chamber of Mashiach. The Baal Shem Tov also went to the chamber of Mashiach, but it's also in the Gemara. So he came back and said, so why hasn't he come? And his answer was, because you missed the second part of the expression. Hayim im b'koili tashmiya, if you will listen to my voice. The Mashiach told him, I will come today if you will listen to my voice. So I can't think of a better way to end than to say, we have just listened to the Rebbe's voice, telling us what we need to do. And if we will listen to it, Hayim. Good night. Thank you very much.